I feel really special. I feel really fulfilled. And all of a sudden, it's like this voice starts to happen of like, okay, it's time to do something else. And I was really scared.
Welcome to Eating Glass. It's a podcast where in each episode, we ask startup founders the questions no one else will. Our goal? To reveal what it's actually like to start, scale, and exit a company. I'm Joe LeMay, and I bootstrapped my reusable notebook company, Rocketbook, to a $50 million exit.
And I am Will Nitze, founder and CEO at IQ Bar, a nutrition company I took from 0 to 40 plus million in annual revenue. For better or worse, we are your hosts. Eating Glass is sponsored by IQ Bar, which is my company, so be nice to it. What do we do here? We make IQ Bar plant protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe instant mushroom coffees. All of which are special because they are the only thing in their category that centers on nutrients good for your body, protein, electrolytes, things like that, as well as things that are good for your brain, so magnesium or lion's mane to name a few. They are all delicious. Most functional foods and drinks taste like crap. Ours taste good, and taste matters. That is despite them being super low in sugar and super clean label. There's no weird stuff on our labels. And by the way, they're affordable. Functional stuff is usually price gougy, and we are not. I will not be offering a discount code. I will instead ask you a favor. Go to Amazon.com, search for IQ Bar, IQ Mix, IQ Joe, or some combination of the three. Find a non-sponsored listing, click on it, buy it, wait for it to arrive, and leave a review. And that is the only favor I will ever ask you. Thank you very much. Eating Glass is also sponsored by Ramp. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software that we at IQ Bar have used for 5 years now, I think. And I actually reached out to them about sponsoring, not the other way around. I love them for 3 reasons. Number one, simplicity. Everyone on our team gets a physical and a digital card. Replacing cards, pausing cards, putting limits on cards, insanely easy. Setup takes 10 minutes. Number two, cash back. 1.5% cash back. You don't have to deal with points. If you're messing around with points, you are wasting your time. Just get cash back. Number three, they are better at categorizing spend. So we not only save money on the cashback side, we save time on closing our books because they're just better at classifying. They give us an incredible offer for you guys, $250 free when you sign up for Ramp today. Go to ramp.com/glass. That's ramp.com/glass. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, Anne Mahlum, welcome to Eating Glass. It's awesome to have you here. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I had really humble but amazing upbringing, and am really grateful for my upbringing. I grew up in North Dakota, and I didn't have any reason to think my life wasn't going to go exactly as planned. But when I was 16, I got a very difficult dose of reality of what my dad's life was like and his internal struggles. My dad is an addict. I've always known that about my dad, even when I was 16, but his addictions have never been prevalent in my life because he got clean and sober before the age of 5. And so unfortunately, my dad started gambling and he got into a lot of debt. My family did not have a lot of money. My mom is very good with money, but my dad, was about $50,000 in debt. And it got to the point where he had to tell my mom. So she kicked my dad out of the house that day. I mean, imagine having this family unit that like everything seems fine, and just like that, you find this news out about your dad. I was really angry. And I spent the next 3 years being resentful. I became a very avid runner. And I think in that time frame, Joe and Will, I just built up this, I'm going to make my life amazing. Like, this is not going to define me. Like, I will be damned if I become some sort of statistic. It made me wanted even more, whatever that was. And I went to college, graduated early, went to graduate school, and then found myself in Philly at 26, completely lost. And I just wanted some purpose and some fulfillment and some meaning and some direction. And I was running by this homeless shelter. I had ran by that homeless shelter hundreds of times. I didn't pay attention to those guys. I didn't see what we had in common. For whatever reason, in May of 2007, we connected. They started to wave at me. I waved back. We started to build this little friendly relationship each morning. And I kid you not, it was just like, as they say, this light bulb moment. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm supposed to start a running club for these guys. Like, I convinced this homeless shelter to let me start a running club. They were not convinced it was going to work or they would be interested. So when I was starting this running club, I got the press involved really quickly because they couldn't believe their ears around homeless people running. It didn't make sense. It got so much attention. It started growing. What everybody else saw as a running club, I saw as a vehicle, that this could be the impetus to change people's lives. And once we get them to look at themselves differently and change their identities, then we can place them in jobs and homes. So you take a community of people who want to see them succeed, who respect them because they're doing the work, and we go out on a run together, and like now all of a sudden we have something in common. And in addition to just the run, I added in these components that allowed for celebration. And what I had found is that was what was completely missing, was a positive support system. And so we were creating an environment that these guys felt seen, respected, cheered for, cared for, loved, and rooted for. And it's just like they wanted to be there. And I learned through my dad, you can't force anybody to do anything, especially a grown man. So it was just obvious to me that in order to create change in anybody's life, you have to start with their emotional sense of self. So that was kind of, the connection, and it does work. I mean, obviously it's still going on today, almost, I guess, 15 years later. And so the organization did grow. Like I don't really know where this came from, but like I do have a knack for scaling things and putting process and systems in place and understanding, okay, if we're having one team here, how do I replicate this? How do I open another running club at this shelter? So it was like, okay, let me open more teams in Philly. And pretty soon I had 5 or 6. So I just like created these mini microcosms over and over again. And then I said, okay, well, how do I go to another city? What structure do I need to actually have for that city to be fully self-sufficient? I need an executive director. The money needs to come from that city. So it was like, awesome. We opened a Baltimore chapter and then a DC chapter, and all the money came from the corporations in those cities. And so as that grew across the country, it's like amazing. 6 years in, this thing is in 12 cities by this point. I mean, I'm getting a ridiculous amount of attention, you guys. I was a CNN hero, ABC World News Person of the Week, on NBC Nightly News. I mean, national media, every award you can think of. And like, my life's pretty great. I feel really special. I feel really fulfilled. And all of a sudden, it's like this voice starts to happen of like, okay, it's time to do something else. And I was really scared.
How did you get to the point where you knew that you wanted to start this new workout studio and then, turn it into a nationwide phenomenon?
I was in LA for Back on My Feet. I walked by this studio, which was very pink and had like these reformers in it. I thought it would be just a cute little fun workout to do while I was in LA. And it was so hard. I went back to New York and I started taking a similar workout there. And at some point I was just like, this business model is insane. I know how much I'm paying for class. I knew the power of sport and community, and I knew how to build community. Like, I am very good at making branded experiences that make people's lives happier and healthier. And I'm like, no one's built a brand around this. And if I didn't know you could work out like this, that means the majority of the population doesn't know. And my body started changing. I started to feel so much stronger, and I wanted to provide that for so many people. And I was like, holy shit, this is my next thing. So I moved to DC, back to DC, where I had some connections. I had saved $175,000 at this point. I was even more determined because I didn't want to be a one-hit wonder. I wanted to show I was an incredible entrepreneur, that I knew how to create and build things. And I was also so passionate again about what this thing was that I was doing because of how it made me feel. And I couldn't wait to introduce people to it. And so I had an offer from one of my board members at Back on My Feet. He offered me $75,000 for 30%. And the studio hadn't even opened yet, but he just believed in my abilities. And like, I'm so grateful that I said no. I have the money. Why do I need to take his money? I didn't want to put myself in a position to do that. I wanted to put myself in a position where a bear was chasing me and I had to figure this out. I opened my first studio in November of 2013. We can talk about the beginning stages. I had 2 machines in my apartment training people, very, very humble. I was frugal with my money, making sure I'm spending it on the right things that were going to hopefully produce, ROI for the business in the beginning. And I had 5 locations open in the first 11 months.
Here in startup land, we talk a lot about product market fit. Leading up to that, clearly you got it at some point. You said you had some machines in your apartment. What were the things that you were doing to evolve your idea, flesh it out, to test and to tune it up so that you were prepared to actually go big with it?
I didn't do anything. Honestly, I didn't. There was no market research. I saw that it was working in New York. In LA, these studios were full, and that was like social proof for me. And again, because I sort of felt like I was the market research as a woman who'd been working out for the last 25 years of her life. And, I put so much time and energy into working out and still struggled with body image. And it really was only until SolidCore that I felt my body reflected the amount of work and effort I put into working out. And so I just that was enough of a validation point for me. And I trusted my ability to build community. And so for the first studio, Joe, there was only 10 machines, right? And I'm like, I did my pro forma, I did all of that. And I'm like, I just need 400 people that fall in love with this and come consistently. And like, this thing is going to be very profitable. And I got really lucky with the timing. Like there was no boutique fitness in DC at the time. So I had a prime market that was affluent, right? DC is an affluent market and it's one of the healthiest cities in the country. So I knew that my demographic was there. I just had to find them. So I tapped into my media connections. I got a nice big article in the Washington Post. I tapped into my athlete connections there in the running world, the triathlon world, got those people to come in. So we didn't spend a dime on marketing for the first 20 plus studios. Like, I'm not kidding, not a dime. It was all word of mouth. We actually positioned ourselves with SolidCore is the hardest workout you've never tried.
There are an epic amount of themes you cover there. I was just taking notes for the last couple minutes. So many good nuggets. To come to a head of one thing that I think would be really interesting to talk to you about, because you're the first person who's done nonprofits and for-profits. Did you become jaded with the nonprofit thing of you have to keep asking for money, and whereas for-profit, you have this engine that can produce money? How do you think about like the through line between nonprofits and for-profits with mission? Did you feel, I'm creating SolidCore for a mission? It just so happens to be a for-profit enterprise.
Honestly, I never looked at my nonprofit as anything less than a business. And I took money from companies and I said, you give me $100K, I'm going to turn it into $200K because that's my responsibility. And I don't want to come back here and ask you for another $100K. I want to actually ask you for less. And it's my responsibility to put your money to work. And so this 24-hour race, we got corporate sponsorships and was able to, of course, get people to sign up. And we made a ton of money through those events. I tell that to people in nonprofit space who are raising money. I'm like, raising money for cats. I'm like, I'm never going to donate to you. I don't have a cat. I don't like cats. Like, great for you. I'm glad you're doing it. But like, you're barking up the wrong tree. Bad pun intended, I guess. But it's like, you have to find the cat lovers, the people who have a lot of money who are cat lovers. Go there. It's the same for SolidCore, that we don't have a lot of men, in our studios. And I don't really care anymore that there's not a ton of men, because usually at our studios, like in New York, there's 15 people on the wait list. And normally they're all women. And I'm like, okay, great. We're not going to change all of our marketing to target men. Women are really they make up 85 to 90% of the client base. We need to continue to speak to them because they are the ones that are in here and spending money. But we know that our best money spent on marketing is toward the woman. A lot of entrepreneurs fail because they spend money on things that don't matter.
You said it's the toughest workout that you've never tried. Like, not everyone's up for the toughest workout. Not everyone's up for CrossFit, right? So it's a sliver within that gender demographic.
Yeah, and people dilute their brand all the time. I roll my eyes and you see a lot of these fitness places, and there's some in my space that are like, this is for everybody. And I'm like, oh God, that makes me just not want to go there, because what is your brand if you're for everybody? It's such a stupid thing. Like, when we had 50 studios, no one knew who we were, but the right people who we were marketing to knew who we were. Now, a lot of people, of course, in the fitness world, and maybe not even the fitness world, know, because we're just so big and expansive. But I hear that all the time. Like, you need a niche Like the niche products that target a certain people are usually some of the most successful brands that are out there because they know how to speak to their client and their customer. A lot of people just think like, oh my God, like, someone's already doing that in the space. I'm like, it doesn't, that you need such a, like, we have hundreds of thousands of clients and we're a healthy 9-figure business. Like not even we probably have tens of thousands of clients if I'm being honest, but like you just don't, everybody thinks that everybody needs to love their product and brand in order for it to be successful. And it's just like not true. There's a lot of people, 50% of people that try SolidCore never come back. They hate it. That's fine. Like we're targeting the 50% of people who are like, this is what I've been looking for.
And by the way, 50% repurchase rate, you'd be jumping up and down for joy.
And if you don't know business or understand, retention, after a first time use, you may think that's bad and that might scare you. But when you look, into the actual data of how many times people try things and don't come back, it is a really great number. The same with the back of my feet. We had a 46% success rate of moving people out of the shelter. That doesn't sound so high, but you're talking about a very volatile population that's dealing with addiction. Like that was an amazing metric that we were able to share with corporate donors that like, this just isn't a running club. This is a running program that creates self-sufficiency in people's lives because it's a more robust program. Like we go through job training, like we start with running because we have to start somewhere.
I know nothing about brick and mortar. Could you just walk us through everything from like, how much does scouting the right location matter? Getting the right lease terms with the right location? What are the key metrics? Is it dollar per square foot per hour? What makes or breaks a brick and mortar business?
Yeah, it's it's all those things, Will, right? Unit economics. It's like when people ask like, oh my God, what's the one thing you do for your skin? I'm like, if it was one thing, it would be that easy, right? But like you need to nail all of those things. And out of necessity, right? I didn't have a lot of money, if you think about it in the beginning, like all intents first, like a big giant company that would come in and open these things. So I had $175K put in the first company, first studio. And I had to pay $34,000 in a security deposit, that first one. Like that was so painful for me. And I hated it because I knew I was probably never going to see it again. And you're tying up a good portion of the cash that I have. I had such like a negative, resentful feeling. So I was not going to do that again. And, everybody's like, you have to do security deposits in, brick and mortar. And I'm like, I'm going to find a way not to. And so out of the 120 locations that we have now, there's probably 150K in security deposits, maybe a little more, but like because we had to do some in the beginning. What makes or breaks a brick and mortar a lot is your financing, especially over the first few months as you get going. So I learned to ask for abated rent in the first 6 months, right? I'd rather have you give me a 10-year lease with 6 months on the back end so I can just have these 6 months to get revenue pumping in so I can get cash flow. And I convinced these landlords that me growing fast was going to be better for the locations because I was going to get brand equity and they were going to be more full. And I realized that landlords only cared about their overall ledger. And I would always meet with them in person so they could get excited about who I was and what I was doing. And what I also learned is I need to have multiple LOIs out. Those brick and mortar companies that are like, our second location needs to be here. I always think that's dangerous because if you're telling me that your concept's only going to work there, that tells me that like your brand may not be resonating with as many people as you may want it to be. So we would constantly just be like, okay, cool. We have 5 over here, 5 over here. Which one works, the best for us, knowing, especially this day and age, that the data shows that we can have, over 1,000 SolidCore studios in the country. So we have a lot of options where our demographic is that we can open and be successful. You have to know how much you can afford to pay for your CapEx build out and what your rent is going to be, and then what your pro forma is going to be. So of course, we build a pro forma very conservatively on what we think we can charge per class and what the utilization is going to be. So we want to make sure that that number is like 70% of what we think we're actually going to do so that we have that cushion to be able to feel good. Where we invest in the space is where I can put machines, because the only way we make money is by selling those machines. And you may have noticed they're actually a little close together. I put those things closer together because we were at such wait lists. And I'm like, if we put them 6 inches closer, we can get 2 more machines in so many of our studios. We were able to add 51 more machines to our current studios. The amount of revenue that we just created that went right to our bottom line by making things a little tighter, but like no one was going to cancel their membership because of that.
Well, I'm trying to also tease out, what are the things you did that no one else did? Like, I thought the vertically integrating the machines was fascinating. You built your own machines. You were licensing machines from a manufacturer at first. You guys got in a lawsuit. You won. He had to buy back the machines, and then you literally learned to build your own machines. You were making them for $9K, and then you were making them for half that. That's like an epic move, right? I don't think the vast majority of people would have done that. I know you say you hate when people say, this is always the way it's been done, right? Which would have been an example of, oh, space out your machines. That's just always how it would have been done. What are other instances where you zagged when other people would have zigged?
Yeah, well, that's a really a good one and an important one. And the thought process was like, is the risk worth the reward? And I knew that if I didn't figure this out, I was never going to be able to grow the company in the way that I knew that I could based off of the product for the or demand for, the product. So I had to figure that out. Like it was the only way for me to be in control of the manufacturing. I can't open a studio without them, and to get the costs down to make the overall enterprise value of the business, more attractive. So yes, super important. And frankly, even leaving this guy that I knew was going to sue me, that was another big moment as well. I think another one was the number of machines. All these Pilates studios that you go to, Club Pilates, and even like they stick to 10, 10, 11, maybe 12. That's all I was sort of seeing. And I'm like, what if how do I get to 20? Like, and oh, you can't coach. It's too confusing. Too many people. It's unsafe. Like you can't have 20 people in that room. And I'm like, no, that's not a good reason, right? If we can coach 10, we can coach 20. So we just kept adding machines because every machine in the studio that was filled was like an additional $5,000 to $7,000 a month. And we didn't have to pay the coach that much more. We may pay them revenue per class, so maybe a little bit more, but like the machine paid for itself in the first half of the month. I'm like, we have to figure out how to do this. So we worked with the training team and started to ramp up. Now there's studios with 30 machines, in them. And those studios are doing, of course, triple what the first studio was doing because we only had 10 machines. We opened in North Dakota. Everybody was opening in these tier 1 markets, and also was just aware that if I get a better geographic footprint, my company is going to be worth more. If I can show this thing works in some tertiary markets, some smaller whatever, I know that I can then open so many more locations, and private equity is also going to buy into that. And at Peterson, who's my first private equity partner, will tell you that one of the main reasons, besides our unit economics, that they were so wanting to do our deal was like, she put a studio in Bismarck, North Dakota that has 75,000 people and it's crushing it. Like she's going to open all over these smaller cities. And that's what we've continued to do while dominating the big cities as well. So our geographic footprint and our brand just, had so much more juice to the squeeze. And obviously private equity likes that.
Community comes up a lot, right? And I think that that's one of your uniquely deep insights, actually, that is a through line through your career. And a lot of our listeners and audience are early stage or entrepreneurs. What would you coach them in terms of how do they think about building a community from the early stages? What are the key elements to it?
Yeah, so much about these in-person businesses is about personality. And I whenever I hired my first set of coaches, I looked for personality first. Were people going to like you? Were they going to want to be around you? Were you funny? And all of them were extraordinary. Like, again, I still talk to all those first few coaches today. I know I had to let one go, but the other ones were just nailed it. And they were so bought in. And so we also made sure that there was certain consistency about the experience. And the number one thing was, you have to learn everybody's name. because it shows that like, we see you, you're a part of this community, I want to build a relationship with you. And so again, these are like little layups that frankly you realize other people just don't do. And frankly, again, I was in the studio so much. Like I had a party 2 months after we opened that we paid for. I just wanted everybody to connect. We all hung out. I did my best job, which I can talk about later, kind of bit me in the ass a few years down the road. But like it was just like no boundaries. Everybody was always hanging out. We were working out together. I was taking class so people could see that. I mean, some of my best friends were formed, through SolidCore clients and coaches. So people could just feel the authenticity. And when you add in working out to like that dopamine level and you can get the community right and that people really want to get to know you, it's just like, oh my God, we just did this really hard thing together. It's like finishing a marathon with your best friend. You're just like, you feel so connected to that person. So I think figuring out what your brand is, Joe, is important. And then it's like, okay, how do we translate that into the experience? When SolidCore was about inclusivity and community, we needed to make sure that people were feeling that in every single opportunity, that we got. This is another small thing. When you go to buy a water, you have to just write your name down and it shows we trust you. Like just put your name down on a water and we'll charge you later instead of like having to go through the process and wait and whatever. I wanted it to be as fast, as easy as possible.
Trust, which is actually super rare. Like that I can't think of many other than like a country club or something. Like no business, brick and mortar business, can you walk in and just write your name down? Like trust is such a rarely used element to build community.
And the little gesture, it is trust, but the little gesture of like removing a transaction just tells people that this relationship that you have with us, the community, is not transactional.
And again, it was out of like, we didn't have front desk staff in the beginning, both because I didn't want to pay, but again, I was trying to harvest all my money. And secondly, I was like, this is going to allow the coach, like there's no one checking you in so that you can just, like in Soul Cycle, like it's like the woman kind of like walks through the smoke and gets on the bike and then leaves. And there's no connection with that person in the way that there's your SolidCore coach.
It's so epic when there's a win-win to where something helps you economically and helps make the product better. It's like the minimal decor thing earlier. It not only do you save money, but now I feel more badass that it's a concrete floor. It's like more raw.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about trends? I think another theme that I wrote down when I was listening to your doing research for this was just like this idea of trends. And so fitness is so trendy, right? Like cycling was a trend. And then, there's all these different trends that come and go. And it's the same way in my world with dieting. Right. So keto came and went and paleo came and went and yada, yada. But you guys have stayed resilient through all those. And by the way, trends aren't always a bad thing, right? I remember you saying you massively benefited from a boom in Pilates in 2022, 2023 at the tail end. Right before you sold, you hit this epic tailwind. So you definitely benefited from them, but also were resilient in the preceding decade and then have been resilient since. So just how do you think about trends in fitness? And I guess also I would tie in like luck, this concept of luck, because to me, it's not a lucky story. You make your own luck and you were crushing it well before Pilates kicked off, but maybe there is a little luck, right? That Pilates did take off. So how do you think about trends and luck?
There's definitely situations where you get a little lucky, right? And I'm sort of with you because I like to think I'm in control of my own decisions that I make, but like we're the ones who decide to do the thing, which creates the luck. Like my timing in DC of being, first and having a bunch of people that were ready for it, SolidCore was not, we weren't an adapter. We were one of the pioneers, of it. So, timing was obviously great there. And you get lucky with timing with whether it's geopolitical, macro trends and things like that. So from a trend perspective, listen, I think the trend in fitness, depending on your sophistication, is going to move toward AI. I'm going to talk about a company that I'm invested in and now working with in a second. But for SolidCore, the reason why I think why we did such a good job, we still survey people today. Why do you take SolidCore? Number one answer, community. Like that is still remained very true to the foundation. If that went away, we would have way less of a successful business. Number 2 is the workout. Like the workout works. I mean, I'm still taking this workout 10 years later because it works. So I think when trends happen, it's the company that takes the thing and makes it a trend. Like there's still lots of purist cycling and stuff out there, but SoulCycle made it trendy because of the way that they were sort of doing it. And the soulfulness, the crying, all of these things, people then associated cycling with SoulCycle. And when that sort of, they got in some bad PR and whatever else, kind of people associated like, oh, I don't cycle anymore because of the company, so to speak. But Pilates, I just, because I know it works so well and I see it over and over on social media with these women being like, look at my body, 30, like I have abs, 30, I've been doing this for 30 days. I've been working on my whole life and nothing in 30 days. So it's just over and over and over again that you hear testimonials like that. And I think it is because time under tension is the most effective way to strength train. And a lot of people have trouble doing that on their own because we're doing that in studio. Now, what SolidCore needs to watch out for is all the other companies, coming up. You've got Jet Set Pilates, which is now franchising. You've got an Australian brand. You've got F45. They're saturating the market. There is going to be more options, and SolidCore will need to figure out how they continue to win the category with so many more players in that space that are offering a very similar modality.
Let's talk a little bit about taking money off the table and some of your experience there. Now, you mentioned that you had an offer very early on, right? 75 grand for 30% of the company. And technically that would be taking some money off the table for your idea. And that was no way. But then later on, you had a better opportunity to take money off the table. If you were advising an entrepreneur and you were on their board or just their friend, when do you think, under what conditions do you think it's appropriate and good and helpful, even motivating, to take some money off the table versus, demotivating?
It all depends on what the entrepreneur wants, for one. It's like when people ask me for money advice, I'm like, there could be 10 different people sitting in front of me and I would give you all different advice based off of where you are in life, what you want, and whatever. So it depends on what you want. For me, I knew I wanted to exit at some point, and I sort of, when I was raising my first round of money, I had solidified for myself of like, I know and I want to make, at least $100 million from SolidCore. And so because I had known that that was my North Star, I worked backwards from there. And so when I had the opportunity with Peterson, and again, they did not like that I wanted to take money off the table. Like I took $6 million off the table when I had 25 locations, and they were like, gosh, like, is this girl going to stick around? Like we'd rather put this all in the business. And I'm like, I get that you would rather put it all in the business, but if you think that I'm in this for $6 million, if you have any doubts about that, then you shouldn't do this deal. Like I am in this for, the long haul. These are my goals and I love winning. Like I want to win this category and I've committed to something. And so that I'm going to do it. And so it took a little, like obviously talk and negotiation, but I was just adamant and I had multiple offers, so I showed the pro formas. I did all these things. And frankly, with that first round of funding, I put 12 million into the company, and that would have gotten us to 100 locations by the end of 2020. Obviously, COVID put a huge damper on that, but we were at 75 studios by, end of February in 2020. And so we had hired bankers to move forward to sell. So anyway, so I knew I could take 6 million off table, keep the amount of equity that I had after that, which was, over 70%, and still be able to work my way toward the exit of what 100 studios would look like. So the math made sense for me. And I was obviously going to get diluted in this round. And I wanted to take a little off the table, get that money working to feel a little diversified. And the same happened in the second round, which again, I did not plan on raising, but we really didn't have a choice in COVID. I wasn't going to sell the business at any kind of discount. I wanted to take another growth round to get the company back to healthy so that I could have the exit that I wanted. So the deal that we structured, I had to do preferred returns on both of these deals, which I was okay with because again, I trusted my capabilities and where the business was going. So I took another $9 million off the table, in that second round, doing the pro forma. Okay, that means X. If we get to these studios, this number of studios in X amount of years, the studios are performing at this level. This will be our corporate EBITDA, do the multiple. This still works for me. So I didn't go in just, like, oh, I want to take X amount off the table. I worked backwards from my goal. And that's how I determined how much money I could take off the table in those rounds.
I think a lot of people think that if you take some money off the table, it'll motivate you a little bit less. I don't know. I think that some success or some money in the bank actually it doesn't really satisfy your appetite, but it starts to whet your appetite a little bit, right? And I think taking care of some basic, living circumstances, having a nice house and, kids' college education taken care of, et cetera, so you don't longer have to live in a world of scarcity and fear. It can put you in a position so now you can start thinking really big, right? When you did take some money off the table and you had that sort of personal finance relaxation, did you actually find that it changed you to free up some of your brain calories just to think bigger, to be a better leader and an entrepreneur, or how did it affect you?
I don't think it affected me. I always, I'm a visionary, right? At least I like to think that I am. So the vision for the company never changed. I knew from very early on I wanted to get to 100 studios. So, the money was great to just, again, great part, get it to work, whatever, but like staying super focused on the task at hand. And I agree with you. Like I was never motivated. I was motivated by finishing the task, having an exit and doing everything right in the way that I wanted. Doesn't mean I didn't make mistakes and mishaps. And I know we'll talk about those, but like I wanted to succession plan. I wanted to get somebody else in place, so I could move into the exec chair role and get used to this idea of letting go of the second thing that I built, which if you don't plan for that, can destroy a founder at some point, even though they think they want to exit. If they haven't psychologically and emotionally prepared for that exit, and all of a sudden, like you turn your keys in, which I did, it's like that can really screw with you. So I wanted to do the plan and the process that I had in place. So those money off the table was just like, okay, part of the plan. And I'll also tell you, Joe, like I didn't think it would have been good for me to sell later and like not that I obviously was making a good salary and whatever, but like to go from where I would have been to all of a sudden having $100 million. I don't think that would have been healthy for me. I have been educating myself ever since taking 6 million. I read all kinds of books and podcasts on money, relationship with money, my emotions around money. And I've gotten to do that gradually. And that's been very good for my marriage. It's been very good for my own well-being and like my relationship with money. So I recommend it. I think from going from zero to all of a sudden all this stuff can be a little overwhelming.
That's really interesting. I've never thought of it that way. It's like a baby step to the much bigger step. It's always going to be shocking, the end result, but I've actually never thought of it that way or heard someone talk about it that way. It's really refreshing actually that you talk about, I started SolidCore to ultimately sell SolidCore. And that's sort of you're very honest about stuff. You talk about the secondary. A lot of people are kind of sheepish about that. You sold the company and you'll freely tell people, I went out and I bought a baby blue Bentley. Like, I think that's very cool and refreshing. And that's kind of how I try to be as well. But it's unique. Like, why are you that way? Did you have to sort of train yourself to be that way? Or is that like a superpower that you feel is innate where you just sort of tell it like it is and you're an open book and that just sort of pervades every aspect of your life?
Yeah, I think society, and I'll include myself in this bucket, has little tolerance for hypocrites and for people who pretend like they're martyrs. And I was just like, I love money. I wanted to, I'm really proud about how I've made my money and that I got to help a lot of people get stronger and love themselves and their body and be happy in this community. And I got to make a lot of money and, become wealthy. Like, I think it's amazing. And a lot of my content I put out there now is about having people step in and talk about, money. And like, there's obviously, people, oh, money is evil and greedy. No one needs that much, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, go ahead. Like, that's fine. But when you find yourself in a trap and act like I'll give you another example. It drives me crazy when CEOs like talk about, how important their employees are and how they're we couldn't do this without you. And like, but when the company sells or has, a liquidity event, they don't get anything. And I'm just like, if you really meant it, you would make sure that some of those proceeds flowed, into the business of the people who were there to do it, which is what I did. And I'm really proud of that also. And it's like crazy to me how it's just not more commonplace or employees aren't demanding it. Like, I've given away millions to my employees because they've earned it. Like, I wouldn't be sitting having my big exit if they didn't show up to work and their ideas and their passion and their commitment. I mean, for goodness sake, SolidCore starts at 5 a.m. in the morning and we have classes till 10 at night, 365 days a year. Like, that's a lot of people who've bought into this, idea and brand. And so I just I think people have to be really careful of the words that they say and the actions that they take. And I just never wanted to be labeled a hypocrite. I think it's really hard to come back from that. Think about politicians, how angry we get at them, when they're speaking out against gay rights, but like having an affair with a man over here. It's like, oh, you just feel like you want to take a shower after you hear things like that. So I've just decided to, be very vocal about the money I have, the investments I'm making, how I'm planning to make, $1 billion in the next 20 some years of my life. Like, I think money is great because you can do a lot of amazing things with it for yourself, your family, and for communities.
But also just selling, and I don't know why there's this taboo, because I tell people I started IQ Bar to sell it, and they're like, oh, that's kind of weird you're saying that. Like, there's this sense that you should create things that'll then be your life's work, and it shouldn't be baked into the DNA of creating it that you're then going to sell it, because that makes you selfish in some way or whatever. And this kind of harkens back to your earlier points about like with Back on My Feet and like, you built something and then you wanted to move on from it, and then you wanted it in the next thing, and you built SolidCore, and then you knew even in the early days there would be a point when you'd want to move on from it. And I don't know why that is the way it is. I don't know why people get weird about that, especially because the second you take investment dollars, by definition, you're gonna have to sell the thing. Those people need a return, and unless you're gonna dividend them out forever, which most businesses won't, like, you're gonna sell the thing. So it's this like unspoken weird dynamic I've found.
Yeah, and I think that's why the day I got to announce last April, to the team, it was a celebration. It was like, oh my God, how amazing. And did this thing she said she was going to do. And any full-time employee had been there over a year, was going to receive, some of the proceeds. Like, some people got over $100,000. And like, I'm really, again, really proud of that. And I hope that they're proud of that as well. So I just find that being who I am, you take it or leave it. If you don't like it, turn the channel. Like, there's other people you can, take from. But I think it's much easier. You almost feel like you're lying, right? It's harder to live your life if you're lying and trying to keep up with what you said. So I just decide to be who I am. I think you could literally go ask a Back on My Feet member and a private equity guy to describe me, and they'd give you the exact sort of same answer. Like, I'm the exact same person, no matter who is around. And that way I don't have to keep up with multiple personalities.
Every once in a while I have a friend come up to me, they're operating their business and they're wondering if they should start entertaining the idea of selling their company, and what should be their first steps and what to expect along the way, right? What do you think? What have you learned through the process? Where would somebody start? What advice would you give?
I think looking at whatever your business is and understanding what companies in that current sector or vertical have sold and why. So for brick and mortar, to make my business sellable, I needed really strong, consistent economics, improved same-store sales every year, low CapEx costs, payback periods, some payback periods for SolidCore under 6 months, like strong payback periods, and geographic diversity, a foundation of the team that like shows that we have system and processes in place. Like, there's so many things that have to be in place, and you can't do that a year before you sell your company. Like, it takes a few years. And so in my instance, because I always knew I wanted to sell, I was doing those things from the very get-go of putting these things in place and of course elevating them and doing reorgs and all of that stuff that has to come with preparing your company.
How did you educate yourself on the key elements of sellability? Did you talk to an investment banker like early on, or an M&A lawyer? How did you get that information?
Not in the beginning. After I got to, 25 locations, I definitely did, right? It was like now I had, and that's why, frankly, for me, I took a private equity partner. People are like, should I take dilutive or non-dilutive capital? I knew I wanted to sell at some point, and it would be better for me to have a private equity partner come in as a minority partner that could help me through that process, and make sure that our data room, what is the next level of private equity beyond, because Peterson's not huge. They've grown over the years, of course, but 2017, they're not like a well-known, private equity firm. So they were going to help guide that. What do we need to improve upon? What does our customer acquisition cost need to look like? How does our retention, need to look, and things that you're going to get dinged on, or why someone may choose to not do the deal. So that I was looking for a partner to help me with those things and educate, what private equity is looking for after I had a good base. And I can tell you that stuff's true. I had two fundraising deals fall apart that were 30 days out from closing. One happened during COVID, a lot because of this BuzzFeed article that came out. And then another one happened November of 2022. That, cited our leaky bucket as like a reason they didn't move. And we're like, what? Like this company was so solid in all of these. And we're like, what? You're walking away from this like huge deal based off of this one thing that anyway. So it just was another good lesson that you have to be buttoned up in every single area. Selling a company is not easy, and private equity does not like risk. They want to add water to the formula that you've already created. They don't want to do a ton of work. They want to see that all of these sectors are figured out, and they just want it to continue to grow. I think I would tell people to look at those, again, whatever vertical you're in, and go see if you can get a hold of whether it's an M&A lawyer or a private equity guy or a banker, and try to find the industry standard, the quality of the business that needs to be there in all of those areas, and work to get your company there over the next few years.
Was the end buyer always going to be a private equity firm? I live in a world, right, food and bev, where it can be PE, but it could also be Kellogg's or General Mills or whatever. And the sort of blockbuster exits are to the big, food and bev companies. But in fitness, is Lifetime Fitness acquiring a brand? I guess Equinox bought SoulCycle, so I guess the answer would be to a degree yes. But
I think a strategic could easily buy SolidCore at this next round. It's been in the news that SolidCore is going through a process now. They are trying to sell again, and they're trying to sell because private equity is ready to get theirs out. The deal that I did, my minority partner last year moved to the majority role, and they're coming up on, I think, 4 years of being in the deal. So, and as you guys know, or maybe know, but listeners don't know, private equity deals haven't really been that active over the last couple of years. So I think, they're probably looking for a win for their LPs. And my guess is, depending on what they sell for, whether it's 600, the number's been thrown there, 700 plus, someone's not writing a check for that amount. They're probably going to do some cash and equity or into a strategic or something. So I think a strategic is probably a likely buyer for this next transaction.
So you just weren't big enough at the point you sold for is there some magical number, in food and bev, for whatever reason, it's you have to be at 100 million in sales and 15 to 20% EBITDA to sell to a strategic? And then the deals that get done to a PE are smaller than that. So was it a size thing, or?
I'm not as educated to speak on that. I don't know if there's a particular size that it becomes okay, now you're strategic. I just think the check size alone, again, private equity can easily write 50, 100, $200 million checks, but I think 700 plus, it gets a little more challenging. That's why I just think you become more viable for a strategic based off of the size of the business.
Looking forward, you mentioned some other aspirations as well, but what are you focused on now? I know you're doing some public speaking, but also what are your goals and what drives you and gets you excited?
Yeah, I don't have this big ambitious goal right now, and it actually is new for me, which feels kind of good. I I am advising. I'm figuring out how much I want to be advising. I mean, it's pretty awesome when you sell. I mean, I get 3 opportunities a day of people sending me startup stuff, wanting to work with me. Will I coach them? Will I advise them? Like, it's really awesome. And I've been saying no to 95+% of those things, because I'm just not as passionate. And frankly, I like the carefreeness of my time right now. Like, I do not want my schedule jam packed from the morning to the night. And I am advising this company called Oxfit, which I was mentioning earlier. You know, they're doing a lot of stuff AI with a beautiful piece of machinery that I think is going to will completely disrupt the fitness industry in a pretty incredible way. Because I think a lot of people spin their wheels as it relates to working out and not knowing what they should be doing and why based on what their goals are. And I'm starting actually a company called A Jaybird, which with my business partner, Jay. And it will serve as an advisory firm to brick and mortar wellness, fitness, and beauty concepts. And we're only going to work with, 2 to 3 concepts at a time to help them get out of their preservation mode into scalability mode, succession mode, and exit modes. And then, I public speak, which I also really love. My whole speech is called Outsmart the Odds, and how to use everything you've got to get everything you want. And there's so many people out there that are in my shoes that, I went to college in 3 years because I was in such a hurry to grow up, but also I had $6,000 for college. I didn't want to go in debt. That's what I could afford, and didn't have entrepreneurs around me. I shouldn't be where I am. I shouldn't have the amount of money that I have based on data. And there's so many people who are like me, and I love showing them that it is possible, but you've got to figure out what are your talents? What is your pain? What is your drive? All of those things actually are the ingredients you need to build the life that you want. I can't tell you what you want, but like I have an ability to get people to think through, again, their own special circumstances, whether they look at them as a disadvantages or not. That's all up to us, and use them to create this extraordinary life, and hopefully showing people it is possible.
It seems like well, okay, so if you grew up and had some hard times as a kid and some unfortunate things happened to you, you had hardship as a kid, and then you, in a way, sort of almost imposed hardship on yourself. You took on these really hard things, jobs, but then also literally you created an insanely hard workout. Like, I was in pain within the first 30 seconds of the workout. So the hardship gets literal at some point too. And then you also, I heard in a past interview, you called yourself a wartime CEO. I'm wondering if that's just like in your DNA. Like, it seems like to a degree you like and you thrive on conflict. And so things you're doing have to have some level of conflict, or you don't feel alive, or you don't feel like you're fully maxing out your capabilities. Is that fair to say?
I don't think it's conflict. I think it's problem solving. That's where, I knew I never wanted to lead SolidCore when it got to this level, because the problem solving is over. I mean, not over, but you know what I mean? It's like, great, keep doing what you're doing, opening more studios. I felt that way. I'm back on my feet. When you take away the challenge for me based off of what my talents are, which is how do I create, build, and scale? Once I kind of get that done, I get a little bit bored. And so if I don't feel I can use my talents, my creativity, my innovation, just like SolidCore's almost too big. Like, you can't really move it as well as I could move it, at 20 studios. I'd make a decision, roll it out, cool, done, new policy, place, awesome. So it's the swiftness that I like, and it's the problem solving, which is why in COVID, and again, I've said this on other podcast, and I'm going to say it here, COVID caused a lot of tragedy for a lot of people. So please know I'm not saying this without recognizing that. But for me as a leader and entrepreneur in person, I am really grateful for that experience, because I learned so much, and I've had to figure out so many challenges, which is where I thrive. But it's like, I remember feeling like no one, this whatever this COVID, like this, that's not taking this from me. This this virus, like, you're not taking this from me, everything that I built from me and all these people. Like, it's almost like COVID became this villain and enemy, like, that I was fighting against. And yeah, I do think, like, I remember telling my team and asking for them, like, if there's anybody you want in this seat right now, it is me. Like, we will win. We will come out of this better and stronger. It is not going to be easy. It's going to be bumpy. You need to know that. I promise to be transparent with you, but like, there is no way that this company does not get back to doing what we're doing. It's the problem solving for me. Like, if that's not there, I'm not interested.
Should we hit rapid fire? You have some 10 minutes for rapid fire?
Yep.
Well, the first one is our Peter Thiel question, and that is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
I'll say this. I say a lot that there's more than one right answer. And in theory, people can be like, oh yeah, that's like really good advice. But in practice, people analyze so much. Like, when they make any decision coming down to buying, whether it's a car or a couch or something, it is like spending hours over this thing. And I'm like, there are 27 couches that would look good here. Just pick one. And I think that's a superpower that I have. Like, I'm a very quick decision maker. And I think the majority of people out there analyze way too long, especially for the level of decision that they're making.
What are platitudes about what it takes for a startup to win that are just plain wrong? So I'm sure along the way you had industry vets that had done what you were trying to do, but had done it a decade prior. And they said, this is the way to do SolidCore. And then you found out that 3 of those things were just totally wrong.
I think one of the platitudes is just, you always hear people like, oh, just work harder. And I think that's the stupidest thing that ever gets said, because you know how many people are working hard on their business that doesn't go anywhere, but they're spending hours every single day and they're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I think it's like, you need to work with scalability in mind if that's what you're trying to do, or growth in mind. And every single decision needs to be about that. I mean, I slept 8 hours a night on average, like through my whole SolidCore time, because of the decision making was spent on things that matter, instead of just working from 5 a.m. to midnight, coaching classes, doing these things, thinking that has to be done that way. So I sort of hate the hustle and grind culture. If you don't graduate from that pretty early, something's wrong. So it's the work harder thing that, like, I don't buy into.
What do people dislike about you?
Oh, wow. So many things. I think, I mean, listen, from my hair to my confidence, I've gotten a lot of flack, and unfortunately, a lot of it comes from other women. I still think we live in a culture, and Caitlin Clark is indicative of that. When a woman rises we want women to rise, but not so far that we make everybody else uncomfortable. And so I have a lot of masculine energy, especially when I'm running a company. And I think that that's uncomfortable for more women than it is men. So I have been told, I have seen the comments. It's like my confidence, my assertiveness, my directness, all of those things can be not liked by other people. But I, of course, have learned over the years to not care. I take feedback when I need it. I do not think I am mean. I don't make decisions in mind with trying to get everybody to like me. I make decisions that need to be made for the business, and I try to communicate those decisions in the most respectful and professional manner.
All right. Biggest mistake or regret throughout the journey?
Not having enough empathy for people when I had to let them go. I'm the one who created this culture that, like, SolidCore permeated every aspect of your life. We were your workout. We were your work. We were your social life. When people worked in the early stages here, we were together all the time. And so when those same people weren't the right people to help lead the business forward, and it's something I still regret today, I feel like I should have had more empathy for what I was actually taking away from them. It wasn't just a job. It was their whole entire community that I, was so special to build the business for. So yeah, that's that one.
What was the single hardest decision you had to make along the way?
That's easy. It was laying off all the staff. I know it was the right thing to do for the business, but in COVID, I had to let go of hundreds of people with no notice. It was just like effective immediately. And the uncertainty that just caused for so many people was very difficult. To take away people's, obviously, paycheck was really hard.
All right, success. You had some concept of what success meant pre-SolidCore, and I imagine you have a slightly different definition today. How did you define it, and how do you define it today?
At a macro level, I think it's the same. Success to me is feeling like I'm winning in the areas that are important to me. Now, those areas have changed. Obviously, I'm not involved in SolidCore anymore in a formal manner. So if the business was doing well, that obviously was important to me and I felt like I was winning. That's like what money is to you guys. Like money is just a trophy for entrepreneurs. Like I did a good job. Like someone paid me all this money for this thing. So today, it's like, did I keep commitments to myself that I said I was going to keep, whether it's working out, like what's the strength of my marriage and how am I contributing to my marriage? It's the categories change, but I hold myself to a high standard and whatever the things are that are important to me. And I think success continues to be, am I showing up in a way that like I'm really proud of myself?
Well, I'd say that was a successful episode. Great job. It was awesome talking to you, Anne. That was great.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Will. Thanks for the fun questions and like letting me get a little bit granular. And you can't do that in 30 minutes of a podcast.
Right on. Thanks, Anne. Have a great day.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
All right, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening, and thank you to our sponsors, IQ Bar. Go to Amazon.com, search for IQ Bar, buy one, wait for it to arrive, leave a review. Please leave a review. Reviews are massive. Our second sponsor is Ramp. Go to ramp.com/glass. They give you $250 for free when you sign up. It's the best credit card / spend management software there is. Use it for years, love it. If you like the podcast in general, subscribe, review it, tell a couple friends, tell your mom, and tune in a couple weeks. Talk to you then.